begin. Three, two. Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, it's International Credit Union Month, but first, it's all about the money. How about go to your local airport and maybe you pull a slot machine handle? Could all that be coming to Pennsylvania? All of that and more follow these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, we're back. We're going to get to a variety of subjects. What would a show on Pennsylvania government be like more than 100 days after the budget has not been adopted by the legislature and approved by the governor, signed into law by the governor, if we didn't talk about the budget? And what would a show in Pennsylvania be like if we didn't talk about Kathleen Kane? But first of all, let me get to the introductions. Joining me is Angela Columbus. She writes for the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Karen Langley, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, two great reporters. They're at the opposite ends of the state, and I got them together just special for you. Right? Great, ladies. Hey, it's good to see you. Angela, it seems like every time there's a budget crisis and they don't want to do, the big tax hikes like sales and income, they look around. Well, right. The governor does, but, they look around. Well, where can we find some money?
Scrambling.
Scrambling. Where are they looking now?
Well, the latest now, the hottest topic is gambling and expansion of gambling and getting money from that. Although I don't know that there is any agreement at this point in time on whether to actually go down that route. There's still a split between Republicans and Democrats on that very question. But it's like Groundhog Day. Every time they're scrambling for money, they go back to this. It seems like they go back to the same issues, the same pots.
And what, gaming, did they go, is it three times, something like three times to try to get more revenue to do the thing, right?
Yes, very much so. But, before they can even discuss that, they actually have to get into a negotiating room because since a big vote in the legislature last week, there have been no face-to-face budget talks between Governor Wolf and the legislature.
Yeah, the governor was not even at the meetings this week, was that right? And was it the Democrats in the Senate or the House? Wasn't it one of the two chambers?
People involved in this say that some meetings have been going on with the legislative level, with some Democrats present, perhaps representing the governor's interests that way.
Oh, okay.
But it's been pretty under the radar this week, pretty low level in the sense of not being huge crowds of reporters standing outside this week as there have been in some past times.
And that's because they're not anywhere close.
No, they're not anywhere close. Each side is waiting for the other to blink and come back and say, okay, I'm going to make a concession on this issue, and it hasn't happened. And there's still there's not a vocal public relations war, but there is a behind-the-scenes public relations war for the hearts and minds.
And they seem to be a little personal, on occasion.
Right.
They've been pretty biting at each other. But look, we started with this revenue, money. Now we're going to gaming. Give the folks an example or two of, and we don't know if it's coming yet. I want to point that out. There's no indication, as Angela points out, it's going to pass. But they have done it three times, always. Give me a couple of.
So some of the examples that people are talking about are things like internet gaming, something that's already going on, but that Pennsylvania isn't regulating and taxing, putting slot machines in places like airports potentially, like the Pittsburgh and Philadelphia airport, in off-track betting parlors.
You mean you're not coming to Lancaster Airport, in my hometown? Come on.
They say international airports. I'm not sure how many international flights they have there. But, one of the points that people make about this, proponents make about this airport idea is that it could be non-Pennsylvania citizens who are helping to put their money into the state budget, people who have layovers.
Come on. We go everywhere and put money into some other state's budget. Yeah. All right, well, we're going to run to a break, and when we come back, it wouldn't be a show if we didn't talk about Kathleen Kane. We'll do that and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back to the program. I'm joined by Angela Columbus and Karen Langley, two reporters covering the state of Pennsylvania, but all things Harrisburg for the most part. All right, Angela, you have been fully assigned to the Kathleen Kane story for most of your life, I'm beginning to believe.
I feel like it's a full-time job. Really.
It is a full-time job, yeah. I don't even know how to explain to our viewers, and maybe you can, what's the latest iteration with the pornographic emails and whether she sent all of them off to the Supreme Court as originally requested. I have no clue. What can you just lay it out clearly for our viewers?
Well, I think the latest was spurred by statements that Kathleen Kane made a couple weeks back after she was arraigned on the second round of charges in her criminal case. Okay, so she walks out of the courthouse and makes a statement to reporters in which she says, and you know, by the way, this is all about people trying to get back at me because I'm trying to expose this pornographic email scandal. And by the way, it also involves another Supreme Court justice. That spurs a story in the Philadelphia Daily News about not pornographic emails, but definitely inappropriate. Some have described them as racist and misogynistic emails that were exchanged between Justice Aiken and some members of the Attorney General's office. So after that happened, you had two independent entities. You had the Judicial Conduct Board, which oversees, behavior among jurists, and then you had an independent counsel who had been hired by the Supreme Court who said, well, we looked into the justices' emails, and guess what? We never saw those. And guess what? Kathleen Kane's office was supposed to provide all that information to us and didn't.
So is she conceivably in some kind of trouble, would you think, because of this? I mean, I can't get a sense about whether, if she says they just found them, how do you know? I don't know. I mean, see, this is where this all gets murky.
Well, she has since responded, saying that the emails that were in this Daily News story were available to these parties a year ago.
Yes. Does available mean sent or just?
And I'm not quoting the statement by saying that.
No,
but
I
think that they.
Right.
I think that she was saying that they saw that, or
she said she made them available for their review. These two entities were conducting reviews of emails sent and received by justices on their government email addresses and their personal email addresses.
Now, the candidates for the Supreme Court this past week had a session at Widener Law School, and they've been pretty. They weren't overly critical, I'd say, but they had something to say about how this should be dealt with, Karen, right?
Well, I mean, this was a big topic, whether there's a need for some reform here. And the message seemed to be that they felt like that the policing, the reviewing of the Supreme Court should be taken a step away from the Supreme Court doing it itself.
I see. And that's been a hot controversy. I mean, most folks, I mean, me included, we don't pay a lot of attention to what goes on at the Supreme Court. But this will begin to become larger news in the next couple of weeks. We're replacing three, right? You want to finish my thought?
Well, three
vacancies,
right? Supreme Court justices' seats on the High Court, and it's a big year because there's going to be a balance of power issue. And if, and I stress this as a huge if, Justice Aiken is in any way disciplined or removed or whatever the case may be from the court, you could be looking at a fourth vacancy.
Oh my gosh.
And so,
and there's 7 people. I get that up. 7 people.
There's 7 spots on the High Court, and right now it is dominated by Republicans, or at least there are more Republicans than Democrats. So it does become, it is a huge political issue, as well as, this is the court that decides major issues in the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, let's go. I mean, Karen, I'll start with you. You've been covering this. Are we anywhere near? I've heard predictions back on the budget for just a minute. This may go on until the new year.
We're just at a point where I'm not going to make any predictions or guesses about what's going to happen.
You're very wise about it. But it could last. I mean, is it conceivable it could last?
I think it is. It's conceivable in that, I would have guessed that we would have had a budget by now. Republicans say that the House vote rejecting the Wolf tax proposals means that we're closer, but Governor Wolf didn't necessarily seem to be taking the message that they wanted him to.
And none of the demonstrations right now we've seen in the past. I mean, maybe is it because even we've got about 75,000 workers are still on the job, no pay, finish that.
It's been pretty quiet around the Capitol. We haven't been seeing huge crowds of people demanding their state budget in place. As you said, state workers are continuing to work and be paid, and so the actual, effects that are going on right now are fairly limited to schools not receiving their payments, some social services, contractors not receiving their payments, but it's not like the whole state government has shut down.
I mean, at some point with the schools, this is what I've been led to believe. I had the Auditor General Eugene D. Pasquale on, and he says by about mid-November.
Right.
So is it going to take the schools? I mean, is that the next likely real pressure point if they have to close? Go ahead.
I think so. It was definitely in 2003 when there was a school funding issue that went all the way until December, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah.
And they finally worked it out because the schools went to the legislature and the governor and said, look, we're going to have to shut our doors. We can't operate if we don't get money.
Yeah, that's what the Auditor General was very clear. He thought mid-November, and then shut doors, lay staffers off, reduce programs, a whole combination of things. All right, thanks for the update. We'll see you soon. All right, it's International Credit Union Month. We're going to talk about something that I don't understand, and I'm going to get an understanding. It's called EMV chip technology. Now, don't go away, because you got those credit cards. This affects you. We'll be back in a minute.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Welcome back. Well, we have a very important financial literacy update this month. Patrick Conway, he's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, and Bob Marquette, he's the CEO of Members First Federal Credit Union. They own a program quite frequently. And before we get into something called EMV chip technology, we talked about this once before. I'm not sure I completely understand it, but it's important I understand, given credit cards and the use of them. But Patrick, let me just start with you. International Credit Union Month, big deal.
It is, Terry. It's an international celebration of credit union membership. We have in Pennsylvania 450 credit unions. We're serving almost 4 million consumers that are members of our credit unions. And October is International Credit Union Month, and it's a great celebration of our industry.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start with EMV technology. Before we get into the details of it, why should people care about this?
The only reason they should care about it is because it might be a little bit different way that they need to use their credit card. Other than that, it doesn't impact them whatsoever.
Really?
That's it. I mean, there's no change in their liability. There's, in most cases, zero liability for fraud on credit cards. That hasn't changed.
Well, then why are we doing this?
We're doing it mainly because of trying to entice the merchants to increase the security on their systems, to enhance their anti-fraud mechanism.
Okay.
The EMV card.
So is this more for merchants merchants than it is for folks like us who put out a credit card?
It's more for the financial institutions who, up to this point in time, have absorbed all of the fraud losses that have resulted from all of the hackers going into systems and things. And there was no incentive for the retailers to enhance their systems, and as a result, there's big breaches.
I'm going to let you explain that in a minute, but okay, based on what Bob just said, does that mean that we're paying more because it costs merchants more? Does you think it raises the price at all?
Well, credit card security has been a growing concern. I mean, more people are putting their purchases on credit and debit cards. The EMV technology will bring more security to the card, and actually the responsibility shifted at the beginning of October from the financial institution to the merchant. So we're seeing a shift there. But as Bob said, from a consumer standpoint, credit and debit cards are safe. The responsibility is, there's really no risk for the consumer. So it's a great way to continue to make purchases for the consumer.
All right, go ahead.
I have another point. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of consumers have seen their card being reissued quite frequently because it was part of a hacking. So this might reduce that as well, because there will be less incidents of fraud at those point-of-sale terminals.
Well, that's important. I mean, that does affect the average. I mean, if you get a business with a credit card in, I mean, that's a problem for folks like us who have the cards. If they've been scammed, something goes wrong with them, that can be a headache. It may not be a financial liability, maybe what is it, $50 or something, but I think that's not. Well, all right, well, tell me how it works.
Well, basically, this is a EMV or a chip card. I've obviously covered up my.
Why would you do that?
Well, I don't want that all over the place. And how you use it is you simply, instead of swiping it, as you do with a traditional credit card, you insert the credit card with the chip in, and the card has to stay in the device. So it might take like a partial second longer, but the card, what it's doing, it's encrypting the data. So when it's passing information from the retailer's terminal to the Visa network or MasterCard network, it's not passing the credit card information itself. It's sending another number that if that transaction happens to be caught or copied by someone else, they can't use it, because these cards are very much more difficult to recreate than a traditional swipe card.
We live in a complicated world. Talking about complicated world, we're going to run to a break. Not that that's complicated, but what about Apple Pay? It's growing, it's important. We'll talk about that and figure out how that plays into your lives.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
All right, we're providing one of the important financial literacy updates. We're going to go to Apple Pay. Do I got that right? Yep. Who wants to start? Which one of you? You start. Come on.
Well, sure, and then I'll kick it over to Bob. We're seeing more people using Apple Pay, and as the technology has evolved, well, Bob, let me defer to you on the...
Apple Pay uses an Apple iPhone. And what it simply does is does something very similar to what we talked about with the chip card. It takes the information from your credit card and it converts it to a token number. So all you do is, where merchants will accept Apple Pay, instead of swiping or inserting your credit card, you simply put your Apple iPhone next to this terminal and it reads the information from your iPhone in a tokenization transaction.
So it acts like a credit card?
Right. Absolutely. It's credit or debit.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Credit or debit. And Is that, and now I don't use my phone that way, but I see a number of people on a credit card holding their phone up. Is that basically what they're doing?
That can be one of them. Yes, there's some other applications that use smartphone technology too. But Apple is the first to come out with this kind of capability. I know that there's the Android telephones are also working on a similar process as well.
And the millennials love it. You know, I think the younger
that's
generations
where I see,
in
I use the
particular,
students, yeah.
You see a lot of that now.
Yeah, well, the same way when you go to an airport, I mean, now you can, I mean, I guess it's a very different thing than what we're talking about now, or aspect than we're talking about now, where I even do it. You get on, you get the boarding pass right on your iPhone. I'm always worried that I'll lose power in my iPhone or something. It'll go out, and I won't be able to get on the airplane. So I always have a hard copy anyway, just in case. But I see more and more people. But in other words, it's different, but in some ways it's the same. It's the advancing technological use of your mobile device for all sorts of purposes.
For credit or debit card transactions, that's all it is. It's very simple. I haven't seen too many retailers locally that are offering it, but I think it's catching on. I know there's a lot of financial institutions that have signed on to it. Members First has signed on to it.
Well, not to get too risque on this program, which we normally don't do. We stick to, pretty conventional topics in some ways. Under credit and debit card breaches, one of them was the so-called Ashley Madison, that dating site apparently where if you're married, you sign up on this site and you can, everybody knows where that goes, right? Don't people have a clue that if they get on do this sort of stuff, you could have a breach and it could all come out?
Absolutely. I mean, we're seeing more breaches, all across the board. So, consumers obviously have to be concerned.
Home Depot.
Home Depot and Michael's and,
a Target. I mean, there's a whole list of these and I guess some of that is unavoidable, isn't it? I mean, given the technology and isn't it like hackers that we read about? No matter what the government does, somehow there's somebody always ahead of them.
Absolutely, and there's anything that's stored electronically can be hacked, possibly.
Yeah.
It depends on the strength of the system, the security strength of the system. I mean, the Ashley Madison was not a debit and credit card issue. It was a database breach.
Yeah, but database, credit cards,
it's the same thing.
In a sense, they're all kind of similar, aren't they?
Yep. The only difference is in a credit card or debit card is someone's actually identity theft. They're grabbing the transaction somehow and reproducing the numbers on the credit card.
All right, well, great update. Thanks for coming in. Now I understand some of this a lot better. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.